I was recently working with the organization that was struggling to make service level, even though they were overstaffed by 2 times. They were 2 times on paper overstaffed, and they still could not make service level. They couldn't figure out why. Why data is not optional when it comes to your workforce management strategy. Well, if you found yourself in this position, or if you've ever struggled with this and you couldn't figure out why you wasn't making service level, this is an episode you definitely want to tune into. Hey guys, welcome to WFM Tipsy Thursdays. I am your show host, the Contact Center Whisperer, the CEO and founder of Solid Rock Consulting. And I'm super excited to welcome you guys to episode 86, where we're diving into all things intraday and data and how it informs your WFM strategy. This episode is brought to you by Verint, which is a leader in CX automation. And later, I'm going to get to show you all the good details around data insights and data bots and all of those different things. So make sure you stick around for that. What I really want to talk to you about today is why data is not optional when it comes to your workforce management strategy. It's just not optional. It is a requirement. As you already know, we are using WFM Go Beyond, the book, to guide us through our episodes this year as we talk through going from tactical to transformation and being transformational leaders when it comes to workforce management. So if you haven't yet got your book, WFM Go Beyond, I want you to go to wfmgobeyond.com, grab a copy of your book because it's informing all of our conversations for this year. So we're currently talking about intraday, and many of you are using intraday in the lowest form possible in your organization. When intraday, your RTAs are very, very powerful insights, right? Or information. They have a lot of information of what's going on in the business if you leverage them in that capacity. And so when I see organizations that are using intraday, the function for merely queue management and agent monitoring, I automatically know that they are probably lacking the insights that they require to inform a great or a transformative workforce management strategy. When you do not leverage your intraday function to drive more than queue management and agent monitoring, what you are missing out on is the ability to inform on strategy of which are my higher queues and what sources are taking what volume, which ones are performing better. How do we allocate this body of work over to these resources that perform better? That is what you're missing out on when you are not leveraging intraday in that capacity. And so I want to tell you about this organization because this is a true story, right? So I was working with this organization that I was telling you about earlier that was struggling, even though they were overstaffed by 2 times the amount that they needed. And so when they called me in, they said, hey, this is what we're struggling with. This is what our pain point is. And we also are trying to really revamp and build up our workforce management discipline inside of our organizations. We're taking on a lot of new business. And so getting it wrong just isn't an option for us anymore, right? Also, overstaffing and just throwing bodies at it at the queue is not an option either, because that could be costly, right? And so we need to be actually very strategic and thoughtful in how we direct, right, our workforce. Workforce being not just humans, but the AI that we're leveraging. How do we be more thoughtful and planful in that arena? And so the very first thing that the Contact Center Whisperer does in true contact center format is show me the data. Somebody type that, right? Show me the data. That's what I want to see. Before I can inform you on strategy, I need to see your data. Really simple, right? Really simple. I need to see your data. And so what am I looking for when I'm looking at your data? The same things that if you had a intraday team that was doing more than queue management or that was doing more calling out agent states, they would be doing as well. But because you use your intraday team in the lowest form, this is most common. So this isn't a shade to any organization that's using your intraday team that way. I'm saying that you have an opportunity to leverage them at an even higher capacity. The very first thing that I did when I went in this organization was say, hey, I need all of your ACD data. Anywhere that your contacts or your customers come into your organization, I want to see this data. So as I begin to look at the data, their queues, I begin to look at their agents, I begin to look at agent states, the sources of where this volume was coming from. I noticed something very interesting. The internal volume, right, or the internal agents took the majority of the volume. Keep tracking with me, right? So overall, the majority of the volume was handled by the internal agents that belong to the organization or reported to the organization. However, the majority of the volume in the queues that was not making service level was handled by another source of employees, right? Let's call it a BPO. So that was first thing, right? Analyzing the queues. Where is the volume coming from? How much volume are you taking overall? Who's taking what calls? What sources are taking what calls? The next thing that I then said, well, what's the performance on these queues? So I began to look at the internal agents' average handle time, AHT, and I began to look at the BPO's average handle time in AHT. Right. And what I discovered was the internal agent's average handle time was half the amount of time that the BPO's handle time was. So the internal agent's handle time, let's call it 3 minutes. The BPO's handle time was 6 minutes, double the amount of time. When we looked at, even though the internal agents are taking the majority of the volume, the BPO is handling the majority of the queues that are struggling to make service level, and their AHT is twice the amount of the internal agent. Why am I telling you this story? Because before I could inform on strategy, on we need to do this, we need to do this with the internal agents, we need to redo a skill profile and reskill how agents are skilled together, or how queues are, because another thing that we found, right, was queue performance. So in digging into how agents were skilled, even internally and at the BPO, we saw that the way your volumes come in, you really need to change how you skill agents. Their skill profiles need to be a little bit differently. You have the majority of your volume coming in on these top 3 queues, but where you're struggling to make service level are at these bottom 3 queues, but those are as far as volume is concerned. However, you have these top queues that drive all the volume skilled with the queues that drive 1% of your volume. So you're never going to make this customer happy that you're taking this queue for. Why? Because their volume is so low that when skilled against this other queue, they're never going to get service. And so we have to change the agent profile, skill profile. And why am I telling you the story? Because before I could inform on strategy, I had to look at the data. And most times what we are doing inside of the business when it comes to intraday is we're saying this queue is blowing out of control. Let me reskill people. This queue is blowing out of control. Let me reskill people. Oh, this agent isn't not ready. We're running after the problem instead of coming around to in front of the problem and saying, this is how I'm going to deal with this head on very strategically. And so that all boils down to your data. What data did I actually look at to kind of pinpoint what was going on? First, I did a queue analysis. So I looked at the volume by queue. Where is your volume coming in? I know what your aggregate is. I know that you take 1.5 million calls, right? But where is that volume? Then I begin to look at agent and the agent profile to see, well, how are agents skilled, right? And then based on how agents are skilled, who performs, which sources, right? So internal agents versus BPO agents versus AI, if that was a source, right? And so I began to kind of really dig into that and pick that all apart. And what we began to look at and do was, so that informed on my strategy on, if this is the case, then this is the strategy that we need to employ. So if data is so important to informing our strategy, then it is important that we are looking at our data to make sure that we are creating a strategy that supports what is happening inside of the organization. Okay, guys, welcome back. I'm super excited to show you guys here in just a second is how Verint's Data Insights Bot, right? So last year, for a couple years now, they've been talking about these bots, and one of my favorite bots is the Data Insights Bot. And the reason it's my favorite is because that's where I'm always going to build my strategy from. What does the data say? I'm not going to build a strategy off of my feelings, off of my emotions, what I think. I'm going to say, what does this data say? And not only what does the data say, but what is the context, right? So I cannot wait to show you guys this Data Insights Bot. So again, I'm super, super excited. So if you have yet to see it, you're in for a treat. And so if you are in here, if you have the Data Insights Bots, you're probably familiar with this layout. But if you're not, I'm just going to take you around really quickly, right? So when I come in here to home, so there's just a lot of good information in here that you can have kind of set the way you need to have it set. But what I really want to take you to see is these dashboards. So two of the dashboards that I really want to kind of highlight is this Open CCAS Q historical, where I can come here and look at which of my Qs. So I can get the aggregate data up here at the top. But one of the things that I think is super cool is I can come here, look at all of my Qs that are contributing to this overall volume, how big that Q is to the overall volume, and then how that Q is performing from a service level and AHT perspective. So that is how I was able to determine. So this was manual work that I had to pull before, right? Whereas now I can just kind of already see this pulled together and say, oh, and I can pick out, oh, this is my highest Q. Right? This is how it's performing. I can also then go and pull another report if I want it, right? To be able to say, well, which organizations or which part of my workforce is contributing to these specific Qs. And then the second dashboard that I want to really kind of show is this shrinkage dashboard will allow me to kind of go in here and look at my shrinkage, not only by like aggregate total of what's happening, and I'm looking at shrinkage intraday. Again, you could create multiple types of dashboards based on the data set that you're looking for. But then another handy thing that I think is super cool is you can analyze further. So if I click on this right here, I'm going to go analyze further and drive into, well, who were the people who contributed to this? So this is going to pull up another window where I can then see my unplanned shrinkage, right? And I can drill into this by employee and see which employees are really contributing to this unplanned shrinkage. And you can see I have this view here, but I don't really like this view. So now I can also change the view here and say, well, give me just a data table, right? So I can see, oh, this is a list of my top people. If I sort by descending, these are the ones that, so if I take the top 20, the ones that are in hours, really having an impact when it comes to my unplanned shrinkage. So many different things that you could look at when it comes to data. And so again, sometimes people can get paralysis by analysis. And so they're just digging. The thing that I like about the Data Insights Bot is that you can ask it natural questions. You can segment data so that you can inform strategy. So that is the point of what we're talking about. And that is the goal of this year, what we're talking about when it comes to workforce. We need to move from the tactical nature of what we are doing when it comes to forecasting, scheduling, and intraday, and move into a transformative phase of how do I leverage my data to transform the strategy that I am informing our leadership on when it comes to driving customer experience, employee experience, and business profitability. So I hope that this was insightful to you. Listen, if you thought Data Insights Bots was as cool as I thought it was, or you have Data Insights Bot and you're like, hey, I need to figure out X, Y, and Z, something, that you're asking about, make sure that you use your Verint University credits, right? I'm going to link to them in the description here on how you can use those credits to get some help when it comes to your data insight bots, as well as your dashboards and all of those different things. And if you are not leveraging Verint for data insights bots and you're like, this would make my life so much easier, especially the shrinkage one. I remember, just don't even get me talking about when I had to manually do this type of stuff back in my intraday days. And now it's here at a press of a button. If you're still in those days where you're manually doing this, there is an answer for you in Verint's Data Insights Bots. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. Until next time, go be great and make sure you make impact. See you guys soon. Bye.